How you doing today, class? Today we will be learning about Chapter 2, about anatomic position, sagittal planes, axis, the terminology you need to use while you're in a session or doing anything professionally when it comes to exercise science, and basically knowing more about the body. Um, right now, I'm going to talk to you about the anatomic position, and this is universal. And so everybody knows this position is all the same when it comes to exercise science in the field that we are in. The position is used to name the location of body parts, structures, and points of the body. You have to stand erect and facing forward at arms at the side with your palms facing forward. And now we're going to go into location and the location terminology. And this is basically where we talk about the different parts of the body and how to find them and where they located at, and the terms you need to use when you're in a professional environment, so everybody can understand what you're saying and where you're coming from. First, we're going to talk about anterior. That means further to the front, and that means, so if I tell you anteriorly rotate your hips, that means rotate your hips to the front. Next, we're gonna have posterior. That means farther to the back. So I can say your butt is posterior. I mean your butt is to the back. That's in the back of you. Alternative terms you can use is ventral. That it equals anterior. So ventral is anterior. That's an alternative term. Or you can say dorsal. Dorsal is posterior. And dorsal and posterior is the same thing, but it's an alternative term. If you say that's around any professional that knows you're talking about, they understand where you're coming from. Example of this is a sternum is anterior to the spine, and the spine is posterior to the sternum. Continuing on terminology, next we have medial and lateral. Medial is closer to the imaginary line that divides the body into left and right halves, while lateral is farther from imaginary line that divides the body into left and right halves. For example, the little finger is medial to the thumb, but the thumb is lateral to the little finger. The next is a real easy one. A lot of people get this quick, real fast. You have superior and inferior. Superior is one thing that means above, and inferior is something that means below. So if I'm superior than the next, that means I'm above the next. Or superior, that means I can say my head is superior to my hips because my head is above my hips. Or I can say inferior means below. I can say my feet is inferior to my hips because my feet is below my hips. And another term we have is proximal. That means closer, and distal, which means farther. So I can say my wrist is proximal to my elbow than my fingertips, which is my fingertips is distal to my elbow than my wrist. That means my wrist is closer to my elbow, but my fingertips are distal to my elbow compared to my wrist because it's farther from my wrist than my it's farther from my wrist it's farther from my elbow than my wrist. Sorry for the miscommunication. Some of the words. So let me say this again so the class understands. My wrist is proximal to my elbow, and my fingertips are distal to my elbow compared to my wrist. That means my fingertips are farther away from my elbow compared to my wrist. Try saying that 5 times. Next, we have superficial and deep. A lot of people use these terms when it comes to like skin and things like that because superficial means closer to the surface of the body. That means my skin is closer to the surface of my body, and deep is farther from the surface of the body. So you can say my veins is deep because it's farther, it's underneath the skin, and it's farther away from the surface of the body. So say it again. My skin is superficial because it's closer to the surface of my body, and my veins are deep because it's farther from the surface of my body. All right, next we have sagittal plane. A sagittal plane, the body. Now, next we'll be talking about planes and everything else. That was just like terminology when it comes to the location of your body, the location of body parts and stuff like that. Now we're going into the terminology when it comes to planes and the definition of the planes, the different planes we have on our body. We have the sagittal plane, and that means the body can move anterior or posteriorly. Then we have the transverse plane, which means the body stays in the same direction, but it can spin. Then we have the frontal plane. The body can move from left to right or right to left. And after that, we have axis. And an axis is a imaginary line which a body part moves. The move around the axis is called the axial movement. The axial movement is also known as circular movement, angular movement, or rotary movement. So remember, you have a lot of terms that can say as you use axial movement for. Angular movement, rotary movement, and circular movement is all examples of axial movement. The medial lateral axis is a line that runs from your left to right, and it's also a frontal horizontal axis. This movement occurs in the frontal plane, and it also runs horizontally and located within the frontal plane. Then you have your anterior posterior axis. This line runs anterior and posterior direction. The sagittal horizontal axis. This movement happens in the frontal plane, and it runs horizontally and located with the sagittal plane. The superior inferior axis line is a line that runs from the superior to the inferior vertical axis. And they also call this a vertical axis because it runs vertically. This movement occurs in the transverse plane. Remember what I said about transverse? It stays, but it can spin. And that's the end of our lecture today. If you have any questions, please be free to stay after class and ask. We can go over it inside the book for any more details. Have a great afternoon, class. Goodbye.